Okay, so that gives you a bit of a reason why we need to understand the technologies. But in addition to that, we also need to ask, what is industrial automation? Now, I'm going to tell you right off, it's a huge topic, probably the two single best books that I can recommend. And I haven't actually read the third edition of William Bolton's book. I have the second edition of it. The third edition has just come out, and it's simply titled Instrumentation and Control Systems. Just a fabulous book. I've looked at the table of contents on Amazon and ordered my copy, and it hasn't changed significantly. So that book is a wonderful book to have on your shelf. If you work with industrial IoT, you should have this book. Simple as that. The other book that I found very practical and very useful, it's an older book now, but it still holds a lot of value. It's by Frank Lamb from 2013, and it's called Industrial Automation Hands-On. And kind of that hands-on part gives you a hint. It's very much so where the rubber meets the road, helping you to understand the practical implementation of these solutions. So if you just pick up two books on this topic, then these would be the two I would recommend. For the certifications we offer at CWNP, we don't require that you have an in-depth knowledge of some of these existing systems. We require only that you understand the basic concepts of what they are, pretty much what we're covering in this webinar, really. And it's up to you to go deeper because we're testing your knowledge on the actual wireless IoT solutions that you might be implementing in these environments. And we want to make sure that you understand those. But I do encourage you to go deeper into these areas. So let's talk about this concept then of industrial automation. It's two words, right? So industrial, what is that? Well, factories or assembly plants that produce products. When we use the term industry, we say in industry or within industry, things like that. We're talking about economic activity concerned with the processing of raw materials or parts and the manufacture of goods and products in factories. That's generally what we're talking about. Now, we do often use the term a little more general. We say there are many different industries, and we might even include the service industry, right? So we talk about someone that's offering services within the IT space, and it almost becomes industrial in nature. But in this context, we're talking about that which relates to industry according to this definition. So we're really talking about those environments where we take parts that we receive in through supply chain, we then assemble those parts, we may manufacture some of our own and combine them with them, and we create an end product. Or we create a component that another organization is going to get from us through supply chain and then use to build an end product that goes to a consumer. For example, I live in Marysville, Ohio, which is famous for only one thing, and that's that we have a Honda plant here. And so Honda builds automobiles, right? But what a lot of people may not know if they've not paid attention to the automobile manufacturing industry is that not everything that goes into a Honda is created at the Honda plant. Instead, there are many other companies around the county and in adjoining counties, and these companies make parts. They make parts for other people too, but their primary customer is Honda. They exist to provide parts for Honda, and then they sell them to whoever else they can as well. And so all those parts get shipped over to the Honda plant, and the Honda plant takes them and begins manufacturing and putting together the thing that becomes a Honda Accord that comes off of the assembly line. And so that's what we mean by industrial in this context. So automation, well, the simple definition is using fully or partially automatic equipment to perform an action. Automatic equipment is self-operating, right? It does it on its own. For example, the old way to make ice was we would take the ice trays out of the freezer, and hopefully most of you are old enough to remember this, but we would take the ice trays out of the freezer, we would bend them a little bit, or maybe there was a lever that we pulled up to loosen the ice cubes, and then we'd pour those ice cubes out into a container and use them to cool our beverage. Well, now we have automatic ice makers in the refrigerator, right? And there's simply a tray, the ice maker makes the ice, there's usually some type of a bar that is down in the tray, and as it fills up with ice, it rises up, and that sensor tells the ice maker, stop making ice, it's already full. When the bar goes down to a certain level, it tells it to start making ice again, right? That's automation. We have it all throughout our house, from our washers and dryers, to our refrigerators, to our stoves and microwaves. Automation has become pervasive in the consumer space, and of course, it's also used in industrial space. Now, one of my favorite explanations of automation in industrial and other environments actually comes from a really old document. You can find this online. It's free to download now. And if you search for human and computer control of undersea teleoperators, I know that seems odd and you might think it's unrelated, but there's a lot of really good information in this document from 1978. It was written by Thomas Sheridan and William Verplank. And in there, they talk about automation and some of the things that take place with automation. And they give 4 ways that automation can be used: to extend, to relieve, to back up, and to replace humans. So on the left side of this diagram, this is their own hand-drawn diagram from that document. And on the left side, you see the humans just taking care of all the load. They do it all. The task is 100% human performed. Okay, you can think of this like a craftsperson who works in their own craft environment, and they have hand tools that they use to make wood crafts, right? So in that environment, the human's doing it all. Yeah, they have tools, but they're doing it all. Nothing is automated. Now, another level would be to go to the level of extending. And what this means is that the human uses computer technology to extend what they can do, to go further than what they could do themselves, and maybe do it better, maybe do more of it. You know, the simple example of that is if I have to do multiplication with 7-digit numbers and I'm doing that all on paper manually, I can do that, but it will take me all day to do maybe several dozen calculations. However, if I use a computer and I just punch in those numbers, I can get the several dozen calculations done in a few minutes. And so that would be an example of extending the human capability. The other element here that is in the sharing category, they divide automation into sharing and trading. The other element is relieving. And what this is okay, the human does work, but the computer assists them in taking on some of that work. It lessens the workload of the human. So they're very similar, but both of these have in common the concept of sharing. The computer and the human are sharing the workload. Now, when we get to the trading category, which is where now the computer's doing it instead of the human, it could be that it's just a backup. So the human normally does it. If the human doesn't do it for some reason, the computer system detects that and it does it automatically. We don't see as much of that these days, but it is a possible way of implementing automation. The more common we see now is replace. And so this is where now the human is no longer involved. Notice our little cute human character is missing, and the computer simply does all the work. Complete automation without human intervention, at least once it's programmed appropriately and it begins the process. So I love this representation. It's a great way to think about how we can use automation. And just think for a moment about IoT. If we try to take IoT and place it into this, we see on the left the human without IoT, and then extending, what does IoT do for me? Well, if you think about something like Alexa, right? Or any other voice-activated system, and I can say to it, Alexa, how long is the Golden Gate Bridge? And Alexa comes back to me 2 seconds later and says to me, well, the Golden Gate Bridge is X meters long. Now, could I figure that out on my own? Well, yeah, in the old days, I could have driven down to the public library, found a book that would document it and look up the length of the Golden Gate Bridge. Nowadays, I could fire up my mobile phone or my laptop or desktop, and I can go to the internet and search for how long is the Golden Gate Bridge. So I could find that still even using a computer in that second example, but IoT makes it even more capable. It extends my capabilities even more. I don't have to pause what I'm doing. If I'm in the kitchen talking to friends and we're making dinner and somebody says, well, where in the world does time come from? I can say, oh, I don't know. Hey, Alexa, where does time come from? The herb. And it can let me know all about it, right? So it extends my capabilities. And then, of course, relieving the human with IoT. Think about something like a garage door, right? The garage door, we can open and close it manually, or we can have an automated system that does it. My garage door, for example, detects that it's been open for a while. If there's no movement in the beam, the infrared beam between the sensors, then after a while, it just automatically closes that door for me. It relieves me of that duty. You could also think of that as kind of a backup. So relieving me of the duty would simply be an IoT system that closes and opens the door for me. A backup would be, I forgot to close the door, I drove off, and now it's going to close the door for me. And then, of course, IoT can even replace some of the things we've done in the past. Think about the old system where we maybe set our thermostat on one thing during the summer and another thing during the winter, at least for those of us that live in climates that have a true summer and winter. Well, now IoT can simply replace that for me, being pre-configured to automatically adjust it based on checking the weather forecast for the future, things like that. So rather than being as simple as, well, every year in April, I change the thermostat settings, every year in September, I change them again, it's doing it dynamically for me all throughout the year. So that, for example, the folks in Texas who recently went through a shocking cold spree, they probably didn't have any system in place to think about winter versus summer as much. But guess what? The IoT system could look at actual weather forecasts and make decisions for them. Replacing the human, I simply tell it how I want it to react according to changes in the weather. Now I no longer have to monitor the weather. The IoT system does it for me. So that's an example in the consumer space to kind of help you wrap your mind around how even this old 1978 concept still applies today in the world of IoT.